Welcome to the Mom Owned and Operated podcast, the podcast about moms and for moms, where we have candid conversations about running a business, raising a family, and remembering ourselves. I'm your host, Rita Suzanne, a single mom of four, digital strategist, and provider of no-nonsense business strategies and tactics. I am Rita Suzanne, and this is Mom Owned and Operated. Today, I have my guest Nelin with me. I'm so excited to chat with you. Please tell us all about you, your business, and your family.
Of course. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Nelin Krull. I am a registered physical therapist up in Canada. I'm in just outside of Toronto in Ontario. And my husband and I co-own a practice here called Myofascial Mississauga. And we're also the co-founders of Myofascial Canada. So we started our joint practice back in 2020, but we've been practicing for just over 12 years together. We have a young family. We have two young children. I have a 7.5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. So very, very busy. And it's, that's life, being a business owner and being a mom.
Yeah, definitely. So, how was it, like, what made you decide to start your business and how did that happen?
It was a bit of an interesting story. So when my husband and I graduated from our master's degree, we both kind of went in different directions. We're both physical therapists. I went more the hospital route. So I was doing a lot of acute care, I was working on surgery, and I also worked in the ER for quite some time. And my husband went strictly to private practice. He knew from the get-go that that's what he wanted to do. And he was lucky enough to have been exposed to this technique that we use called myofascial release at one of his clinical placements as a student. So he just pursued that for the next 7 or so years. And I was in the hospital, and I was decently happy there until I got pregnant with my first child. And then the demands were just so intense. And I'm sure, yourself and the audience is very aware of like what caregiver burnout is, especially when it comes to healthcare. And it was already present back then, not before COVID. So I was working way too much, 10-hour days, doing a lot of heavy lifting, and I just didn't know if I could continue. I did go back to work after I had my daughter for a year, and it was torture. Just a little bit. I mean, I love helping people. It is so fulfilling, but at the same time, it was just really hard. So I decided I couldn't continue at the hospital anymore. And so at the same time, my husband around that time decided he wanted to open his own solo practice. He just wasn't finding what he was looking for at, working for other people in other clinics. And so he started a solo practice, and I helped him set that up because he's so good at treating clients, but he's not good at anything administrative. So the business just took off, and he realized that after a year that he needed to expand, and that he desperately needed my help in order to do that. So we decided to open our practice together in January of 2020.
Mm-hmm. And what made it so hard for you going back to work? Was it just the demands of the job, or just like trying to juggle all of it together?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think the demands of the job are intense. When I went back, I was working in the ER. So I was doing 12-hour shifts, basically 8 to 8. And so those were like my daughter's waking hours. Like she would just have woken up when I left, and she would already be in bed when I got home. So I didn't see her on the days that I worked, and that was really hard. And then, ER is just, it's a wild thing. I don't know how better to describe it.
I'm sure it's super stressful. I remember when I was working in corporate, and just, I hated dropping my son off and just leaving him there. And so I can only imagine you not getting to see her and how, that would,
be so much pressure in addition to having such a stressful job. So I'm sure there's different stresses when you have a business and all of that stuff. And, so let's talk about myofascial release. Because we talked briefly about it, and I'm a little bit aware of what it is, but I'd love to hear a little bit more of what it is and how it's beneficial.
Of course, yes. So myofascial release technique is the way we do it is a sustained pressure approach. So before I get into what the technique is, I want to explain a little bit about what the fascia is, because I feel like that's important for people to understand. So your fascia is the connective tissue of your body. It is a three-dimensional web that basically is continuous from head to toe, and it supports every single structure in the body. So a lot of times when people think about fascia, if they have some awareness of it, they often think of it as like the sausage casing, or like if you've ever cooked a piece of raw chicken, that sort of like white sheath that you kind of pull away. In living tissue, it actually is not just the casing, it is integrated into every cell. So it supports your muscles and bones, of course, but also your internal organs, your brain tissue, your blood vessels, and your nerves. So it touches every structure in the body. And because it's continuous, the way we see the body is you can't compartmentalize it, since the fascia touches everything. So this fascial web, we call it, when it's healthy and happy, everything's moving and gliding freely, everything's all good. When it's restricted, it gets stuck down. So this sort of web gets stuck in, if you can imagine, it's similar to like bubble gum in hair. It gets stuck down, and that sticky area alters all the lines of tension and force in the body. And so all of our typical biomechanical patterns of efficiency become completely inefficient. And so it can create these far-reaching effects where you have this restriction and pain in one area of your body, but it's creating all kinds of weird symptoms elsewhere. So the number one being pain. A lot of people will experience that first. But you can, the thing about fascia is because it touches every structure, you can get really weird symptoms like, like nerve issues, you can get blood flow issues, you can like, some of the things that people come to us to see are like IBS or fertility issues. So it's because it's so far reaching, it can have such a big impact on the body. When it comes to myofascial release, essentially the way to get rid of that sticky gluiness that the fascia gets stuck in, to apply what we call gentle sustained pressure. So we find areas of restriction in the body. They typically present as really hot, really tender, really firm, or even sometimes we can feel that they're vibratory.
Yes. And
so we place our hands in that area and apply gentle pressure. So just meet the tissue where it's at. So we're not forcing anything. We're not like elbowing anybody, and hold that pressure for at least 5 minutes. And then that 5 minutes, that time is key to allow that really sticky, gluey substance that's holding the fascia down to actually sort of quote unquote melt and become less sticky, so that now the fascia can glide again. And all of the pressure that it was creating on all those pain sensitive structures around it is relieved. So not only are you relieving the pain, but you're also relieving the pressure on the nerves and the blood vessels and all the lymphatic tissue and all that.
And it takes repeated treatments though to make it actually go back to its original self, or does it ever go back? How does that work?
It does. Yeah. It's totally reversible. It tends to be that as we sort of accumulate experiences in our life as we age, that we accumulate myofascial restrictions as well. So it's rare that there's just one. And so if you think about that from a structural point of view, if you have one myofascial restriction, you release that. Now that area is moving well, but now you may notice in another area that you feel restriction because now it's like it has been freed to some extent, and it's like, wait, I want to do more. Yeah. So it doesn't take a lot of sessions to get to those areas because there's a lot of full body techniques that we do.
Mm-hmm.
But it is totally reversible, and it is really quite effective for any kind of pain.
So the first time that I heard about it, and I'm sure that like you've heard this before, but when the whole fascia blaster came out, like obviously, what are your thoughts on that? And like that's when I dove like really into it, because when I was young, I started to have cellulite just out of nowhere, and I was like, this is wild.
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
know, especially because I was very athletic and I was, in shape, and I just couldn't understand where it was coming from.
Yeah. So in that context, tools like that, they tend to promote more of like an aggressive, forceful type
Right.
of pressure. And unfortunately, like that will break up a little bit of the elastic component initially, but
Hmm.
it won't help you with that sticky ground substance, right?
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is you get some temporary relief, and then it sort of just keeps coming back.
Comes. Yeah.
The context of cellulitis, essentially what cellulitis is basically just like restricted fascia creating these pockets of fatty
Hmm.
tissue that reduce that sort of smooth appearance of the skin.
Hmm.
So myofascial release is actually an excellent tool for cellulitis.
Yeah.
And more of a hands-on practice. You can also do it with some tools at home. We've taught many people how to do that. So it's, but it's much, much less aggressive and much more pleasant to do.
I think over time, people have realized that, all of that bruising and things that people were seeing is that they were being a little bit too aggressive, and that maybe it wasn't as effective or maybe they weren't following directions. I don't know.
I think what it is too is if you're feeling that kind of, the sensation that people say, like when they leave a treatment of some kind, that they felt the next day they felt like that hit by a truck. It's because it's that aggression creates so much inflammation in the body, and if
Yeah.
we want to truly heal, what we need to do is bring that inflammation down. Actually, so oftentimes we're sort of working against our goal.
Yeah, and anytime you get any type of massage, you're supposed to be, hydrating again and all of these things. So maybe they weren't necessarily fueling their body the way that they were supposed to be. I don't know. Personally, I, I just, I
Hydration is key.
yeah, I just found the whole thing really fascinating, because I believe she was like a physical therapist, as and trained in doing all of these things as well. And so I thought, this is just a really interesting concept. And I've gotten massages that were specific to fascia release because of, like I said, the tightness that I would feel, because I love working out, but I always had tightness in my hamstrings, and so having those massages would help that tightness and all of the extra stretching and stuff. And so that has definitely helped over time. But I think the massaging is wonderful. So what are some things that people can do maybe at home, since if they can't come all the way to Toronto to see you?
Of course. And you know what? We do actually offer a program for people to fly in, get a week of intensive treatment, and then go home a different person. But if you are just starting out at home, there's a couple tips that I can give you. The number one being that time component. Any kind of stretch that you're doing at home, hold it for at least 5 minutes. And so off the bat, that does sound really intense, right? But that's because typical conventional stretching, it encourages you to like go to the end of your range and then like push, like really push into that end of range. In order to sustain a 5 minute stretch, what you need to go is just to that first barrier of tension. Don't worry so much about how much range of motion you're getting, how much your stretch looks like the picture of what it's supposed to look like. It's more of a felt sensation. So going inward, really feeling where that first barrier is and just holding there. Using gravity to help you is really beneficial as well. So you're not stuck in a, bracing pattern with the rest of your body just to be able to stretch one part. So something as simple as, for example, a hamstring stretch. If you don't have that full range of motion to just be able to sit with your legs extended and bend over your legs, if you do, great. Just get into that position and let your upper body hang and wait that 5 minutes. But if you don't, let the knees bend a little bit. You can hold on to like a yoga bolster or a pillow or even one of your couch cushions. Put that on your lap and then rest your upper body on that. So you're partially supported, and then hold that for 5 minutes. If that's too difficult, flip it the other way. Do legs up the wall. Again, you don't have to get your bum all the way to the wall. Just find that first barrier of tension and then just let gravity do the work, right? And when you feel that
or stretch to actually relax and to
it should be
the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. So are you able to, do you take your kids to work with you? Like, what is an actual day in your work life looking like?
Yeah. My daughter is in school, but my son's in daycare, but during the summer, I have the luxury of being able to not have to put my daughter in full-time camp. So sometimes she does come to work with me, actually. It's just, like folding linens in the back or like putting them in the rooms. She actually really enjoys doing those things. I've asked her to help me with like more administrative tasks before, like scanning documents and stuff. And she's like, no, she's not interested in that. It's boring. But she actually does enjoy coming to work with me. I get very little done when she's there.
Of course.
But on the days where she's at school and my son is also in daycare, it usually looks more administrative. So I spend a good amount of time doing consult calls with new clients. And then a lot more of the background scheduling, staff management. Staff management is kind of a huge piece of what we do. We have about 8 staff right now. And so like managing all of their needs as well. And then doing these sorts of things, talking to new people, networking, marketing, accounting, social media, all of the above.
So speaking of that, what would you say is the hardest thing about running a business? Because I always say that people assume that when they start their businesses that they're just going to be doing the thing that they're going to be doing, right? So what, now that you have to do all of the things, what is the hardest thing about running your own business?
Easily social media. It is, it's a beast. If I do get a little bit of help with it, because I have to. I am not a social media marketer. Right. I can come up with some ideas, but feeding that funnel constantly with fresh content or even recycled content or just content in general, content creation is very time consuming. Not only does it take a lot of time, but it's a long game. You have to keep at it. It's not an instant reward, and it's hard to know what's topical, what people want to hear about every time you're creating that content. So that's easily the hardest thing, and then second to that might just be staff management, but only because there's everybody's so different.
Yes. And there's so many things. There's always something going on, I'm sure. I remember when I was in corporate and I was in management, and there was always something, and, you had to deal with at the time. So I can only imagine having 8. I think I was overseeing 5 at the time. So, yeah. So, okay. So if another mom came to you and she wanted to start her own business, what would your advice be to her?
That's a good question. If I'm being perfectly honest, I would say stick to your strengths, like stay in your zone of genius, stay in your own lane, and whatever is outside of that realm, either bring on a partner or hire out, because otherwise what ends up happening is you spread yourself way too thin, and then you don't have momentum, that drive to keep going in your business. I love being a physical therapist. That being said, I don't carry a clinical caseload, because if I did, all of the other administrative stuff would fall by the wayside.
Mhm.
And I actually don't mind it. I help people through other ways, through educating them, through bringing them into our doors, and then our therapists take over from there. But I actually have always enjoyed the business side of things. When I was younger and pursuing, my degrees, I actually had a really hard time deciding between like business and accounting versus healthcare. So this kind of gives me the best of both worlds.
Right. And I think it's good because you're educated in the actual aspects of the business so that you're able to go out and make educated decisions and talk about it in a way that someone who isn't really educated would be able to. So I think that's amazing. So tell everyone, what are you listening to or reading right now? What's on your list?
All right. So right now I'm listening to slash reading, because I mostly just do audiobooks.
Me
Um,
too.
Badass Habits by Jen Sincero.
Love it.
Yeah, her whole series of
I
books is
love her. She's
and
like my fave.
yeah, and listening to her is just such a joy. She's so funny.
She's so
But
good. Yeah.
really, I think the humor helps get all of the information across. So that's what I'm reading right now.
Mhm.
And then listening to, I do listen to some podcasts. I was
Mhm.
recently just listening to the Jay Shetty podcast, but I'm kind of all over the place with that. I'll listen to many things.
Me too. I'll listen to different things just based on topic, and then I'll just jump around whatever I'm interested in. I don't know if I subscribe to many. I just will listen
Yeah.
based on the topic. I think a lot of people do that. When I first started, though, I was diehard on Amy Porterfield and Pat Flynn for Smart Passive Income. And I used to listen to the Fizzle Show. And I don't even know if they're still around, but those were the three that I would listen to on my way to work. We're talking 10 years ago. So those were the three that kind of inspired me to actually start my business, because they were always talking about marketing and business, and they would talk about, websites. And I thought, I could do this. I had
Yeah.
no idea. I didn't even know how to make a website at the time. I had to teach myself how to do this. But
Mhm.
I was like, you know what? I'm tech savvy. I can do it. I don't know what I was thinking. I was,
It's
but I did
amazing
it.
things you can really learn on your own. Like I learned how to build my website. I've learned how to do payroll and accounting and social
Yeah.
media and basically human resources.
All the
Like,
things.
yeah.
Right. It's just going to take us a little bit longer to do it. Right. And even like building websites for other people, it took me a little bit longer, because you have to understand the branding in order to make it for somebody else. You can't just jump in there and say, okay, there has to be some aspects of who it's for and all of these things. But okay, so as I mentioned before, and as I always tell everybody, the main reason why I started this podcast was because I was struggling with like some personal trauma, and I was wondering how other moms were able to do all of the things, because I just could not do all of the things. I mean, I could barely do any of the things. So I love to know how you are able to, like, what are you doing for yourself?
Mhm.
As moms, we often neglect ourselves.
Mhm.
And so I want to know, how are you taking care of yourself? What are you doing for you?
So yeah, that's a really important question to ask. I think lots of moms feel that way. I definitely felt that way in various points in my career, particularly after my son was first born and I had two kids.
Mhm.
It I think that there are seasons in life where it is just hard. There was, like right after my son was born, there was no getting out of the feeding schedule and all of those things. Um, but outside of that, I think that the number one thing that women should really, 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 really work hard on is delegating tasks. There's
Mhm.
no reason why you have to do it all. It's, if you have a good support network, which is key to be able to delegate those tasks, it will make your load much easier to bear. And again, you get to stay in your kind of zone of genius.
Yes.
So I will say, one thing that I've done recently is I hired an assistant to manage some of the day-to-day clinic operations so that I can work more remotely, which allows me to go for a walk in the middle of the day while listening to a podcast, or turn on some yoga and do like 15, 20 minutes of yoga whenever I feel I need it, do my myofascial self-care whenever I feel I need it. And, just like get that little bit extra work-life balance by being able to have the flexibility in my schedule to sort of pause. Okay, I need to handle something to do with like a family issue, and then come back to work.
I recently heard this analogy, and I thought it was just so brilliant. And it was basically that we should work like the lion and not the cow. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but I thought that was so amazing because essentially, and so I have to tell myself, don't be the cow, right? So the cow, this has nothing to do with anything else except the cow is constantly grazing, right? It's constantly grazing. The lion, it doesn't graze. It is in a wait. It's waiting until it sees its prey, and then it's saving its energy until it's ready to expend its energy. And that way, then it has the energy to pounce. And so the way that would work is then when it's time for you to go, you have the energy to go. But the cow can't go because it's constantly expending that energy grazing. And so I thought that was so brilliant because a lot of times as women, we're constantly trying to do all of the things, everything, even like grazing is slow, right? It's a slow paced thing, but it still is expending your energy.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, like, that is so profound. Like, I can't even think of another way to put it except don't be the cow. Right.
Yeah, I like that. And even if you think about that analogy as like how many blades of grass you go through in a day, I'd say that's probably equal to how many different thoughts and responsibilities we're holding on to in our heads every single day, from, like school responsibilities for your kids to literally the groceries, taking care of your house, and then work on top of that. Like the mental load we carry is intense.
Yes.
And so anything that you can delegate from that perspective is huge, just huge.
And so I'm always telling people, like, as soon as you can, hire an assistant. That'll help you grow fast. And so much faster. And a lot of people are resistant to do that just because of control issues or financial issues. Oftentimes, though, it's control. Like they don't want to give up in the control of doing things. And I get that, but it will help you grow so much faster. Plus, it'll take off so much pressure from you. So, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you. Where can everyone find you? Where are you online?
Likewise, thank you. You can find us at myofascialcanada.com. We're also on social media on Instagram and Facebook at Myofascial Mississauga.
And on your website, you shared a free gift with me. Tell me about that really fast because I want people to go and grab that as well.
Yeah, of course. So what I've shared with you is it's basically a 2-pager, really simple, easy to follow document of the types of myofascial stretches that you can do at home to get that really deep, intense, and long-lasting release of the fascia in your body. So lots of really good whole body techniques in there that really anyone can benefit from because we've all got restrictions. But specifically, this guide I've given you helps people to learn how to use a myofascial ball. And we have these myofascial balls, but you can get them at a toy store, a kid's store, a dollar store, whatever. Just basically an air-filled rubber ball. And you can use it to spot treat wherever you need, or you can also use it to do more of a holistic whole body technique. So it gives you all the how-to guidelines and then a visual representation of where to put the ball and what positions to get in. And it's pretty much all done on the floor. So it's quite relaxing.
Nice. Love it. Well, thank you so much. And just one more time, your website is myofascialcanada.com.
Yes.
All right. Perfect. Thank you again for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
And there you have it. I want to encourage you to remember that being a mom who runs her own business is not easy. We all struggle, but just keep moving forward and don't forget to make time for yourself. As moms, we are usually the first thing to go to the bottom of the list. If your business is overwhelming you and you need real solutions, not just some sugar-coated suggestions, apply to work with me at ritasuzanne.com/apply.